Baka po medyo makasulat.
Ayun na nga eh. Hindi, wala na akong time.
Session is resumed.
Ano yun? Anong uniform? Oh yeah,
President.
it's okay with me.
Mr. President. Mr. President, before we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2762, I forgot to mention several guests of our colleagues here. Guests of Senator Ejercito and Senator Ejercito Tulfo, Mayor Adrian Chiu of Luna Isabela, Congressman Alvin Chiu of Pasada Party List, guests of Senator Alan Cayetano, Councilor Demila Macarambon from Lanao del Norte, guests of Senator Gatchalian, officials from the Bureau of Customs led by Deputy Commissioner Michael Fermin and DBP CEO President Michael De Jesus, guests of Senator Amy Marcos, Secretary Robert Borre together with Commissioner Rachel Herrera and Yusek Analisa Te.
Welcome to your Senate.
Mr. President, Senator Gatchalian.
Mr. President, with the indulgence of our two colleagues, may I just be allowed to just make a very short manifestation? Will not take a minute or two, Mr.
Senator
President.
Joel is recognized. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to Senator Gatchalian and Senator Pia Cayetano. Mr. President, noon pong linggo, August 11, official na nagtapos yung Summer Olympics sa Paris, and this is our most successful run in our 100 years of participation in the Olympic Games. Ang atin po na pinagmamalaki na golden boy na si Carlos Yulo ay nagkamit ng 2 gintong medalya sa gymnastics. Sina Nesty Petesio at Ira Villegas naman parehong nakasungkit ng bronze medal sa boxing. Indeed, Mr. President, these are feats worth celebrating along with the gallant efforts of the rest of Team Philippines. Mr. President, we can't wait for our athlete heroes to be back home. In fact, I filed several resolutions to commend them. Pero Ginoong Pangulo, tayo po'y nalungkot kasi yung nabalitaan po natin itong linggo, hinggil po sa issue ng uniform ng ating mga atleta, lalo na po yung ating golfers na sina Bianca Pagdanganan, isa po sa aking mga kababayan na mula sa Bulacan, at si Dottie Ardina. Nag-viral po yung video ni Dottie and lamented the lack of uniforms for them. It was even shown taping the Philippine flag on a store-bought shirt using a double-sided tape. Ginoong Pangulo, I'm not trying to point fingers here. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of this event na sana matuto po tayo because as an athlete myself, Mr. President, who represented the country twice in international competition, I can understand their frustration as they are official representatives of our country. I remember, Mr. President, pag gababiyahe po kami, dala yung Philippine team, pinapadala po sa amin hand carry yung pong uniforme para masiguro na dala-dala namin at meron po uniforme. Kaya po, naintindihan naman natin yung Philippine Olympic Committee and the National Golf Association of the Philippines have explained the logistical issues that prevented the uniforms from arriving in Paris. Pero sana po, Ginoong Pangulo, tunay na magsilbing aral ito sa ating mga opisyal, lalo na po sa mga namamahala sa delegasyon ng Pilipinas sa international competition, para muli, Ginoong Pangulo, hindi na po ito maulit at tinatanggap naman natin yung apology nila, but I just feel, Mr. President, na we have to make sure na this will never happen again. On a positive note, Mr. President, despite the uniform mishap, si Bianca po, who again is a fellow Bulaqueña, almost clinched a podium finish at the tournament, ranking number 4, Mr. President. Si Dottie naman finished at an impressive 13th place. In fact, their exceptional performances made the Philippines one of only 2 nations out of 25 with multiple entries to have 2 players making it on the top 15 of the competition. So again, we congratulate our golfers and the rest of our athletes who gave their 1,000% in representing our country in Paris Olympics. Mabuhay po kayo. Salamat, Ginoong Pangulo.
Manifestation of the gentleman is entered into the records and duly noted. Senator Gatchalian is recognized as well as Senator Cayetano for the latter's interpellations to Senate Bill number 2762. The lady may proceed.
We're ready with the permission of the sponsor. We will continue our interpellation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. We're ready to receive some questions, Mr. President.
We are going to show what do you call it, a slide. So, with your indulgence. That's not the slide I need to show, so we're waiting for the proper slide.
But meron tayong breakdown. Yung nasa division, kita nga.
Hindi. Yung the one that starts with macro instability. That's fine. That's it. Okay. So we'll proceed. So I'm very certain that our sponsor is familiar with this. There are 2 tables. One is World Bank 2005, perceptions of severe constraints for doing business in the Philippines, well, doing business in general. And then there's a 2017 World Economic Forum, most problematic factors for doing business. For 2005, the top 5, I'll just mention the top 5, but this slide will form part of the record. Macroeconomic instability, corruption, electricity, tax rates, regulatory policy uncertainty. I might as well read 6 to 10. Crime, theft and disorder, tax administration, labor regulations, anti-competitive practices, and cost of financing. From the World Economic Forum 2017, most problematic factors: inefficient government bureaucracy. Number 2, inadequate supply of infrastructure. Number 3, corruption. Number 4, tax. So it's the same number, tax regulation. And 5 is tax rates. 6 is policy instability. 7 is access to financing. 8 is government instability like coups. 9 is restrictive labor regulations. 10 is poor work ethics in national labor force. So, Mr. President, my first question to the sponsor is, saan kaya dyan nagfo-fall ang incentives? Because we are now talking about changing again the incentives, because one of the major policy changes in the CREATE law is to provide to rationalize the incentives. This has been something that economists all over the country have agreed upon that should have been done in the last 30 or 40 years. They consider it a landmark legislation that we were able to rationalize the incentives. And so here we are reviewing the incentives that we had just rationalized the law was passed in 2019 and it became, sorry, we passed it in 2019. The Senate passed in 2019. It became a law, I think, 2021. So barely 3 years ago, what is His Honor's guesstimate? Saan papasok dyan ang incentive?
Yeah. Well, without looking at the details of the WEF rankings, I would assume that the proposed Create More will fall under tax regulations and also tax rates. These two goes hand in hand. Tax regulation would probably be tax administration, meaning making it easier for companies to navigate our tax laws. And at the same time, number 5 will be the competitiveness of our tax rates, because tax rates actually, we're actually competing with our neighbors in terms of offering what we can offer, what's the best we can offer. And I would assume that this law will fall under number 5, Mr. President.
I agree. Number 5 in the World Economic Forum list, and probably for the World Bank list, regulatory policy uncertainty would also be a factor. That's on the left side. Number 5, regulatory policy uncertainty. My concern here now is that we are changing the rules again. And in my consultations with the business sector, of course, the business sector would want lower tax rate. Alam naman natin yon. And government, Department of Finance in particular, would want to, of course, increase the revenues of government. So that's that balance that we're always looking for. But another thing that the business sector pointed out was the policy uncertainty. So when we started discussing Create, they also said that if we can decide right away.
Yeah.
So now, the sponsor and I are in a unique position because we are both, he was my predecessor and I'm currently the chairman of the Committee on Energy. That is also one of the requests of the industries to have clear policies.
Correct.
Because in the case of energy supply, there are many investors who would like to come in if they are assured of a market.
Correct.
And they're assured that the market is predictable.
Correct.
That there will be a market for their product. Eh kung ibaban na pala natin yung product nila, mabuti ng umpisa pa lang alam na nila, di ba?
Correct.
So I think the sponsor and I can
Yes.
really agree on that. So on that regulatory policy uncertainty, this is why I have a problem with Create More. And we will read later on an opinion of Action for Economic Reform, wherein they thank Congress for the passing of Create, and they warn Congress of playing around with it now. Now, my statement has nothing to do with unclear rules coming out. Excuse me.
Ingay eh.
The sponsor cannot hear me and I cannot
Yeah.
speak any louder. So if we may ask that there is no other meeting going on. Not to mention, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Action for Economic Reform cautioned Congress in amending Create. One reason being that we already set these policies, and it's important that we give it time to do its job. But I wanted to make it clear that this representation has no issue with the sponsor clarifying rules that have made the law's implementation difficult and confusing.
Yeah.
That part, this representation has no issue.
Yeah, right.
If the law was not clear enough, or if the implementing agencies chose on their own, which is how I've heard it said a number of times, that it's the agency that refuses to implement the heart and spirit of the law, then by all means, we have to support
Clarify, yeah.
any changes that need to be done. But what I want to discuss today, and for as long as it needs to be discussed, are the changes that the good sponsor, and again, I will also repeat, I have so much respect for the sponsor, for the work, the time, the energy he puts in. But I also want to be sure that we are not further confusing the business sector. This administration has 3.5 years to go. And I don't want to be standing here in 3.5 years and reviewing create another more. You know, let's all agree that this is the best. And I don't mind if this bill is massacred, amended. I don't mind that the create law is changed. But we need to be consistent, and it cannot be, honestly, it cannot be administrative. It cannot be dependent on what the current, of course, the current administration has all the right to decide on their policies. But we have to be, Congress has to be strong in shepherding this measure so that it stands the test of each administration. That is my point, Mr. President. So that is where this representation is coming from. So I'll go now to the specifics.
Mr. President, if the
Of course.
the good gentle lady from Taguig will allow, I totally agree on policy stability. In fact, that is something that our country is not known for, having concrete stability in terms of policy, even regulation, for that matter, even legislation, for that matter, Mr. President. And I'm always being being someone in the private sector before. I also felt that problem with in regards to dealing with our government, and that's something also that is present with MSMEs. It's also present with big businesses. It's also present with potential investors. So in reviewing Create More, we made sure that we are not changing policy, albeit improving and enhancing policy in terms of incentive mechanisms, Mr. President. So we're very careful in not confusing, if I may borrow that word. We're very careful not to confuse existing investors and also future investors that will be enticed to come to our country. I'll give you a very specific case in point. And this is when yesterday during the interpellation of Senator Risa, I mentioned to her that there is, and I am sure the former chairperson of the Ways and Means Committee, in dealing with Create and in dealing with Create More, there's a tremendous push and pull from different stakeholders, from government, from businesses, from regulators, from IPAs most especially. And one of the things that the IPAs are strongly encouraging and strongly lobbying to bring back is the concept of separate customs territory. And that principle has been erased from the first Create. And I support that because in the review of the separate customs territory, I mentioned this yesterday, where there also evidence that abuses happened in the past. And I cited some concrete examples as well on how they abused this separate customs territory. So my point there is, even though the lobby as well as the position paper that supports going back to the separate customs territory, we did not adopt that, because that will again change the way we treat VAT zero rating and VAT exemption that is being enjoyed by current businesses. And that is one of the most lobbied principle by the IPAs and also by other businesses. But again, just to have consistency from Create and make sure that it will be carried on in Create More, we did not adopt that principle. So, in other words, Mr. President, we made sure that Create More only enhances and only clarifies items that needs to be clarified from the previous Create, from the first Create, Mr. President.
Thank you, and I appreciate that example of His Honor. Maybe one thing that can be done is also present us with a list of highly lobbied issues which the committee stand firm on and did not give into precisely because of the belief of the chairperson that these are already good principles
Yeah.
that should be upheld. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
That is much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President.
On that note, and I congratulate His Honor because I remember that issue.
Yep, I'm sure.
So,
Yeah, that is a very that is a sticking point to a lot of our IPAs, and to this date, they still they're still in this view that the separate customs territory is beneficial to their operations. But then again, if you
Yes.
weigh the cost and benefit, especially the leakages that happened in the past because of this principle, it doesn't warrant to bring back that concept anymore. Another concept,
Yes, go ahead.
if the good gentlelady will allow, another highly debatable concept is the role of FIRB. And as we all know, during the first Create, we expanded the role of FIRB. And the concept that we adopted because of that expansion is discipline. And I believe in that. And I've seen, I remember attending the hearings during the Create. I remember that a lot of these IPAs, they kill each other. And the concept of race to the bottom happens among these IPAs. And that is not on an overall scale. If you look at the macro scale of things, and that's not very good for our country, because instead of attracting quality, high-value companies, we are attracting low-value companies that are not generating income for the government, not generating numerous employment for the government. But yet, because of competition among the IPAs, they lower down the tax rates, and instead, these businesses that go to these IPAs would enjoy tax rates that are not commensurate to the investment that they poured in. So instead of the lobby was to go back to the old regime, meaning the IPAs will give out the incentives, and FIRB will just remain to be a monitoring body. We did not give in to that concept. We remained as is in the concept of empowering FIRB to give them more disciplinary powers over the IPAs. And I believe that FIRB should have those powers so that discipline will be instilled among IPAs. There'll still be a level of competition with the IPAs, but the competition will be closely supervised by FIRB. So that concept remains, in other words.
Okay, thank you also for that, no? Because
I'm sure that was a highly debatable issue also
yes,
during the
of
first.
course it was, because we understand that the concern is that it would create like a tunnel and become too FIRB centric,
Yeah.
which is also why there is an amendment for FIRB to only directly be involved in the applications for 20 billion and above.
Correct.
But I did have questions about the role of FIRB now with respect to policing, monitoring the
Yeah.
IPAs. For the body's information, prior to Create, there is no government agency that even knew how much income was
Yeah,
being
that's true.
generated by the IPAs.
Yeah.
They were not even submitting their
Cost-benefit.
annual, their cost benefit, like yung bang inoffer nila na incentives, ano yung kawalan, but what
Yeah.
would it redound to? In fact, if I recall correctly, we were even asking what is the technology transfer, and we
Correct.
have no data. We do not even have, I'm looking at the minority floor leader, the scientist in the mathematician and scientist in the room. We didn't even have data. Now, with all those incentives we gave away, and to put it very simply in layman's term, kumbaga, nagbenta tayo ng discounted na discounted na discounted. So normally, pag nag-discount ka, ang habol mo is makarami ka. Para overall, kita ka pa rin. Wala man lang tayong data na nagsasabi na nagpapasok tayo ng mga negosyo, foreign businesses na binigyan natin silang income tax holiday. Ang mga Filipino companies nagbabayad. Wala silang babayaran na income tax for many, many years. Tapos yung babayaran nila after that is what you call the fixed rate? SEIT, which is just 5%. Wala tayong data to show na ano yung napala natin doon. Wala.
Yeah.
And supposedly, that is the job now of FRIB under the CREATE law. So
Correct.
his honor assuring me that will stay.
Yes, Mr. President.
And do you have the data to show what has been, what each IPA has been able to produce, like from their existing locators, since CREATE started? Yes.
Post-create, yes, Mr. President.
For IPA, maybe the team can just submit it to
Yeah,
my
there are
team so
14
that
IPA.
I can review it and then I can give my
Yes,
comments.
Mr. President, we can submit to Her Honor the investments that went in per IPA post-create.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we'll submit
No,
that.
not just what came in post-create. I think I saw a report on that. But the monitoring of the existing businesses that are registered with each IPA. Like
The cost-benefit analysis
of
per
each,
IPA.
Yes,
Yes.
for each IPA.
Okay, Mr. President, we'll submit to
Okay.
Her Honor about
And then I'll just ask questions after we receive that. But sorry, can you just go back to the slide before I leave it for my next topic? I just wanted to point out that number 1 on the list of World Bank is macroeconomic instability. And I do believe that this has something to do with what we are doing now with CREATE, because macroeconomic policy refers to the entire operations of the economy. So it means ano lahat ng mga policies natin that affect doing business, that affect the people's livelihood, that affect all of us. And being a developing country, foreign direct investment is a big part of macroeconomic policy. And I'll quickly go now to the slide of Secretary Ralph. I'm doing this anong tawag doon? Hindi po to scripted yung questions ko kasi yung kay Secretary Ralph kanina lang
Kanina
yon.
sa DBCC.
So wala pa yan sa
Sa DBCC.
sa notes ko. But anyway, I can just refer to it and then kahit pahabol na lang, I just need my iPad so I can look at his Meron siyang medium term na
MTFF.
Medium-term
fiscal
slide, no?
framework.
Hold on. No. I haven't show me the PowerPoint.
Meron kanina. Nandito.
So I'm looking at the presentation of Secretary Ralph, no, and early on, I'll tell you which slide it is. I'll have my team try to, it's number 4 of his slides. Refined medium-term fiscal program ensures the following: reduce debt and deficit, which he talked about extensively, create more and better jobs, that's what I want to talk about, increase people's income and reduce the poverty rate. Okay, yung create more and better jobs, this is very Ralph Recto, if I may say, which is a good thing. Having had lots of experience in local government in Batangas, one of the manufacturing capitals, I
Correct.
think, of our country. Nakafocus siya dyan, no? And that goes directly to reducing poverty because
Yes.
obviously if they have jobs,
Right.
it reduces poverty. And I don't know about increasing the skill. I mean, I don't know yet. I do know. I know that we have more work to do in terms of increasing the income, because if our manufacturing is really the low-level manufacturing,
Yes,
then we know that that's one of the lower income generating businesses, no? Which is where the former administration was trying to that was the direction they were trying to push us to, na in as much as this country, I have to say, take my hats off to all the women in this country that entered into garment manufacturing factories. Dahil sa kanila, and most of them are women, dahil sa mga kababaihan na ito, they change the future of their families. And this is a worldwide documented. All these women who before were homemakers, sewing in their homes, nung sila ay naging gainfully employed in these garment factories, they changed the future of their families because nakapag-aral yung mga anak nila. And these children became professionals, naging teachers, naging accountants. A beautiful story. It happens all over the world. It has happened in the Philippines. Sadly, the direction then becomes, let's now let your children who are now educated and trained have higher paying jobs. I think naman any parent would want that, right? Which then makes the garment making and other similar industries less desirable if you really want higher income. That is the reality. It is politically a sad reality kasi nga gusto mo nga i-push sa higher earnings. So what do? You invest in skill development, so on and so forth. But that is why it is politically difficult to be able to say na mas bibigyan ko ng incentive itong mga technology-based, research-based jobs versus these other jobs, because nga, yun yung pinupush mo, yun yung gusto mo.
Yeah.
If a mayor had a choice kung ano yung factory na papapasukin niya, di syempre yung pinakamas malaki ang income, di ba?
Correct.
Pero ang pangit naman pakinggan na pababayaan mo yung isang industry na yun ang ikinabuhay ng mga pamilya nila. Hindi naman dapat kinakalimutan yun. But you know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
yes,
I'm
Ms.
talking
President.
about the difficult political decisions you make to really be able to encourage and facilitate the transition to a higher income generating
Correct.
to higher income generating industries, right?
Right.
Or
higher value.
higher value.
Higher value
So-
industries.
So, the reason I said this is very Ralph Recto, because I know na doon ang pinanggagaling niya, create more jobs. So that is my question now for the sponsor. Kaya haba-haba ng background ko, but there is a purpose to my background. Is that the purpose of create more now? More job creation rather than income generation? Because, at uunahin ko na yung, hindi na kita pahihirapan, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, my concern is, yung mga investors, binigyan na natin sila ng mahabang grace period, yung mga nakakatanggap ng income tax holiday and many benefits. Umabot na ng 17 years ang binigay natin na time for them to avail of those incentives. Under Create More, dinagdagan pa natin. So parang never na natin sila gustong magbayad ng normal na income tax. If that is the policy, then just explain, yan ang policy. Kasi mas habol natin na maraming trabaho na pumasok dito, hayaan mo nang kahit hindi sila nagko-contribute sa income tax. O di sige, di yun. Kasi yun ang tingin ko.
Yeah. Well, actually, Mr. President, the ITH, we didn't touch the duration of the ITH. What we only extended is the special corporate income tax and as well
Yes.
as the enhanced deduction. For special corporate income tax, you pay 5%,
Yes.
of which 3 goes to national and 2 goes to the local. So in other words, may nakukuha tayo doon.
Yes, sorry, I agree. Hindi naman ginalaw yung
Yung
income tax
ITH.
holiday kasi fix yun.
Correct.
Pero nadagdagan yung period. And to be clear, meron namang income na
Yes,
pumapasok.
correct.
And most, if not all, companies will say they prefer that.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with that. If that is the preferred route and if this makes us competitive,
Correct.
okay lang yun. In fact, gawin mo pang 100 years.
Yes.
Yun lang yung tanong ko na ano ba? Kasi ayoko
Correct.
lang nung kada bagong administration, labi ng labi.
Correct. In fact,
Diba?
Mr.
Ano ba
President,
talaga?
In fact, Mr. President, you're absolutely correct. If you ask these corporations, they would rather have the SIT special corporate income tax perpetual.
Let's be clear now so that the viewing public understand, because I clarified this last time I interpolated. Itong ESIT is a gross tax that is gross tax rate that is applied para lahat nung ano mo, yung base nung tax na yon is just your revenue times 5%.
Correct.
Ganon. Versus yung normal na alam ng mga companies na lalagay mo yung mga deduction mo,
Yeah,
tapos
correct,
yung
correct.
iba hindi papayagan ng,
Yes,
ng
correct.
BIR, mag-aaway pa kayo ng BIR, 5 years
Correct.
later, nag-aaway pa rin kayo.
Correct, Mr.
So,
President.
mas gusto din nila yung simple lang.
Yes.
And I don't mind. If you
Correct.
make that permanent, make it permanent.
Correct.
I'm just saying that I'm not so happy because it contributes to what I posted is the unstable economic policies
Yeah.
that we have.
Yeah, well, I get the point of Her Honor, and I join her in her statement that we should really have, the country should really have concrete and stable policies,
Yeah.
investment policies, legislative policy, investment legislation, investment policies, even regulation, Mr. President. And I truly believe in that personally. And like I said, in my past private life, I also experienced a lot of changing regulatory issuance, and that creates uncertainty and also creates problems for our taxpayers and our investors. So that's why we did not change the ITH, because the ITH, in effect, government will not get any taxes under that regime. But what we just extended is the special corporate income tax and enhanced deduction. Under enhanced deduction, you will still get 20%. Government will still get 20% corporate income tax in that regime. So in both regimes, government takes up something.
Yes, meron naman.
Meron
Yes.
naman
Oo.
siya. Meron naman siya.
I also understand, Mr. President, that for the companies that are investing 20 billion pesos, tama ba? And above, there is a... 27. Na makaka-avail na. 27. It comes to a total of 27 years that they will have favorable tax rates. Again, I don't have a problem with it per se. If I see some look of in the faces of your team, so I will give them a moment to digest that. 27 years because 7 years ITH plus 20 years SCIT or EDR, or a total of 27 years. Is
Correct,
that
Mr.
accurate?
President. Yes,
Is that
Mr.
accurate?
President. It varies, Mr. President, depending on your location, Mr. President. But yes.
No, I'm looking at the all other areas, and then dun sa Metro Manila, roughly it's 27 also. In NCR, it's up to 20. Depends. There's 24, there's 26. I mean, I'm looking at the table, so I know it varies, but
Yes.
up to 27.
Correct,
So,
Mr. President.
for many people, this looks like a horribly long time. Now, wow, 27 years, ang ganda ng tax rate nila. But we understand because these corporations don't think in terms of human years. They think in terms of generations.
Yes.
So, naiintindihan natin yan. Ang gusto ko lang malaman, Mr. President, is this what it takes to be competitive? Ganito ba ang palakaran in different Southeast Asian countries? Kasi I know that is the goal. Tama ba?
Yes,
One of the
Mr.
major
President.
goals is to be competitive. So
Correct.
that when people say, I want to go to Asia, they will think of the fact that the Filipinos are known to be very hospitable. It's nice to live there. Siyempre, decision ng expat. Gusto nila, masaya sila dito. Number 2, they speak good English. Okay, whatever. Number 3, well, hindi tayo magpapatalo dun sa incentives na binibigay nung ibang bansa.
Yes.
So, ito ba yon? Ganito ba yung binibigay na up to 27 years?
Well, Mr. President, different jurisdictions will have different investment regimes. Can I get yung different jurisdictions? So that's why we created a suite of incentives that we can give, aside from longer special corporate income tax, longer enhanced deduction. We also give out additional enhanced deduction, for example,
Yeah.
for electricity. Because even after 2 years, the desire before was after create, our electricity costs hopefully will lower down because of the reforms that we'll be implementing. But unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that. So instead of waiting for electricity prices to go down, we just increase
The deduction, the deductible.
50% to 100%.
Para in effect sa kanila, parang bumaba na rin yung kuryente nila.
Correct. In
Yes.
effect, parang bumaba sa kanila. So, to answer your question, different jurisdictions will have different mechanisms for incentives, Mr. President. So, and based on the study, this is quite competitive already vis-a-vis Vietnam or Indonesia or Malaysia, Mr. President. In other words, we can already compete with this list of incentives, Mr. President.
So what is not currently offered in CREATE that makes us less competitive?
One of the most important there is the electricity deduction, Mr. President.
Okay,
Because
I understand because electricity was at the top of the list. So
Correct.
since hindi natin ma-resolve yun head-on, by way of deduction na lang. Okay.
Correct.
I can understand that.
If we look at the list of deductions, Mr. President, we also, let me just go through the list. Mga deductions muna. The deductions. Anong deductions? May chart. Ayan to. Okay. So, Mr. President, power expense, we increased it from additional 50% deductibility to 100% deductibility. And then we also increased, we also added expense related to exhibitors, trade missions, and trade fairs. This is for marketing. And the rationale here is to encourage exporters to go out and sell their goods outside of the Philippines because export is one of our biggest dollar inputs that improves our currency balance. So initially in the old CREATE, there's no deductibility for additional deductibility for expenses related to exhibitors. We added 50% for that. And then we also improved the timing of the NOLCO, the net operating loss carryover. So in other words, Mr. President, the deductibility is also part of the list of incentives that they can choose from. So they can choose whether they will go with the easier SIT or the enhanced deduction that will make their manufacturing company competitive because they can apply for those additional deductibility, Mr. President. So, in other words, they have a list. No? They can choose what's best for their business.
Understand. This list of enhanced deductions that His Honor is discussing is for IPA registered investors. Am I correct?
Yes, Mr.
They are,
President.
yeah. So, because when you mentioned that there's now additional deduction for those who have expenses related to their trade missions, exhibitions in trade missions or trade fairs, it makes me think of the small businesses. I just came from the cacao, the chocolate, the cacao Congress in Cebu a few weeks ago. Wow, there was like thousands of farmers, small businesses present there. And one of their requests is support to attend trade missions. None of them, I'm certain, are registered in
IPAs, because
IPAs.
they're MSME.
So yeah, and I know that under this Create More, you have another section for any type of investors. If I'm not right, you have this deductions for where you have this list of benefits for IPA registered, and you have another list for just regular investors, di ba? And so would these small businesses fall under it? Parang hindi eh.
No, Mr. President.
Yun nga eh. So how do we because when you talk about trade missions and I actually think the biggest beneficiaries would be small businesses.
Yeah.
You know, these are and you know, it could be artisanal, but it could also be really high in research, and we know very well that our inventors don't get enough support. So I feel bad that this is now just being extended to IPA registered businesses.
Well, Mr. President, a feature that we enhance in the bill is if you are an exporter, meaning the definition of exporter is you export 70% of your goods, you can enjoy VAT zero rating on all your purchases domestically, Mr. President. So if you are a small company but you export 70%, then you can get zero rating in your domestic purchases, Mr. President. That will make you competitive globally and competitive vis-a-vis other markets, Mr. President. So that's a feature that we included here so that we encourage exporters, no matter what size they are, and also to make their goods competitive, Mr. President.
I'm still thinking of the small businesses that they're not yet exporters, they want to be exporters, that's why they join the trade fair, and it may require, kumbaga sa artista, it may require na nakailang palabas ka muna, pakita mo muna yung sarili mo ng ilang beses bago ka mapansin. So anyway, can I just park that idea
Yeah,
with his
well,
honor?
take note of that.
Because really,
The MSMEs will take note of that and how we and think about how
yeah,
we
I mean,
can
and in fact,
help
it may
them.
not even be in Create More, but I don't like to leave it behind. And in our defense of Create, we were mindful of this to the extent that if there's another vehicle, another law, other policies that we can ensure covers, captures, supports this sector of the small businesses, we should be able to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, earlier, DBP president was here,
Yeah.
and I told him that you have to be able to capture these small businesses, these projects that require the DBP kind of investment that other banks would normally not be
Correct,
investing
correct.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I can leave that for now. So I will go back to the discussion I left off, my discussion last week on the SIPP. His Honor had given an example. So my issue was, Create More now introduces this idea of having a local SIPP. SIPP is the Strategic Investment Priority Plan. So I'd like to read what the current Create law states and what the Create More is proposing.
Saan yung local SIP?
So under Create, simple lang naman to eh. On the Strategic Investment Priority Plan, this is Section 300.
Yes.
The Board of Investment, in coordination with the Fiscal Incentive Review Board and the IPAs, other government agencies, and the private sector, shall formulate the national SIPP. Okay? So simple lang, si BOI in consultation with FIRB. The proposed amendment now, well, the amendment in the committee report now has a insertion in the latter part of that same section that says each investment promotion agency, each IPA, in consultation with the Board of Investment, may formulate their own SIPP, which shall be known as the local SIPP. So that's an area of confusion for me, and His Honor and I left off with His Honor giving an example being halal food, correct?
Halal.
His Honor
Correct.
remembers. Okay.
Correct.
So ito po yung situation that I see. His Honor said that, for example, in Mindanao, it's very possible that unoptimized, hindi pa na-optimize yung potential natin to promote halal food, to produce halal food, to manufacture, to process, so on and so forth. So you want to give the local agencies that ability to include them in the SIPP. That is my understanding of the example that His Honor gave, correct? Okay. With the same example, I have the opposite view, and I think it's the view also of Senator Alan, because Taguig has the biggest Muslim population in Metro Manila, and they can very well, and they are producing halal food also. So if you look at the existing CREATE law, may tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Necessarily, if food manufacturing, which I think is a medyo lower level type of manufacturing, but it can still receive incentives. If you are located in Metro Manila, you will get less incentives kasi nga the objective is to push the investments in industries outside of Metro Manila. So necessarily, the CREATE law already captures that scenario na kung dun sa lugar sa Mindanao, outside of the cities, even sa Visayas, even sa Luzon, so in the same business, somebody could be creating halal food in Taguig City, for that matter in Valenzuela, and then somewhere in the Visayas and Mindanao, they will all receive naman the incentives. Kaya pinakamaliit yung sa Metro Manila kasi nga, pinopromote natin yung sa malayo. And once you let these local SIPPs come up with their own, lalo magkakagulo kasi yung CREATE, na-set na eh. Based on location, ito yung incentives mo, and based on the type of activity. Meron na eh, may formula na tayo eh. So bakit gusto nyo pang dagdagan? Hindi ko talaga maintindihan kung ba't kailangan dagdagan yun. Kasi we will go back to the uncertain macroeconomic policies. We will go back to the race to the bottom. That is my humble opinion. If we now allow each investment promotion agency in consultation with the Board of Investment. So tinanggal pa si FIRB. Kaya nga natin nilagay si FRIB kasi FIRB will somehow oversee na, no, let us push all our, for example lang, let's go back to the halal food. Paano kung pwede palang i-create yon in, alam mo yung, remember during the very first few days of COVID, I remember seeing pictures sa internet na buti pa dun sa ibang bansa, meron sila nung, ano ba tawag doon, pagkain na ano ba yun? Yung, dehydrated. Meron silang mga dehydrated food, parang yung mga kinakain ng mga astronauts, kinakain din yun ng mga mountaineers. Dehydrated food na nakapack, nandun na, kompleto na yung calories. Pag tinignan mo, mukha lang siyang chalk, baka sana, hindi naman lasang chalk, pero kompleto na yung calories noon and yung nutritional value. So, syempre, ano na yun, di ba, with advanced technology, thankfully, hindi naman natin kinailangan yun. Pero, if I'm not mistaken, yung brother ko si Lino, bumili pa siya nun sa Amazon, pinadalan pa niya kami backpack na may kasamang flashlight, tubig, ano yun, yung pills para sa pampalinis ng tubig, water purifying pills, and then meron ng mga dehydrated na pagkain na yun. So, siguro yung ganong klaseng halal na dehydrated food, maybe that would even have the higher level because it includes na research and development. But it doesn't change the fact that covered na yun ang CREATE eh. And the reason na FIRB is there is to ensure that nadi-differentiate natin yung ano. So yun lang naman, I'm parking that with His Honor kasi I really have a problem with this local.
Yeah, I understand where the good gentle lady from Taguig is coming from, and I acknowledge her example. And the way the SIPP is designed right now, it's only one nationwide. No, it doesn't take into consideration the different geographical locations under the CREATE. It doesn't take into consideration the geographical locations of the IPAs. So it's one big IPA for the entire nation. And during our consultations with the IPAs, we realized that different IPAs will have different strengths and weaknesses based on their geographical location. For example, the one that we interacted the most is CESA because they're located on the eastern seaboard, and they have a different geographical location, obviously, in that area. And they wanted to promote, for example, aquaculture, aqua processing, fish processing, and all of those sorts. So, in other words, those type of businesses will not be present for IPAs, for example, located in the West or located inland, like Clark or AFAB. So, we realize that different IPAs will really have different, because of their geographical peculiarities, will have different strengths and weaknesses. And we want to capture that nuance. So that's why we allowed the IPAs to create their own local SIPP, but it should be in line with national policy, national guidelines, and national standard. It will not be just purely at the whim of the IPAs. It will be in line with the national guidelines.
Kakamot muna ng ulo. Mr. President, may I ask His Honor to repeat the exact example that he was using to illustrate why it would not, what would not be applicable inland versus, I just wanted to hear that example, just like the halal, so I can,
Like for example, IPAs that are located near the shore, they have plans to open up, let's say, seafood processing, seafood cold storage, seafood manufacturing, as opposed to, let's say, Clark. Clark is inland and they don't have any body of water beside them. So it's a different business model for Clark. And seafood definitely is not applicable to them. So we just want to capture the nuances of the IPAs and give them a chance to grow and to identify industries that are based on their strengths. But definitely, it's not based on their whim. No, it will not be a decision on their own. It will still be in line with national guidelines and with national standards.
I understand what His Honor is saying, and I will read the law, the CREATE law again for the record. This is the CREATE law. The Board of Investments, in coordination with the Fiscal Incentive Review Board and the investment promotion agencies and other government agencies, shall formulate the national SIP. So the IPAs are consulted and they have the opportunity to provide their input for the national SIP. So pag sinabi nilang ng mga IPA na nasa inland, ito kailangan namin. Pag sinabi ng mga IPAs na nasa bundok, ito ibibigay naman nila. Yung mga nasa seaside, ito bibigay nila. Yung mga nasa industrial area, ibibigay naman nila eh. So I don't understand why there is a need to change that and now say that each investment promotion agency and consultation with the Board of Investment, meaning tinanggal mo pa si FIRB, may formulate their own SIP. Why don't you say that they will submit it and that the FIR and that this whole group will take into consideration the particular circumstances, the particular terrain, the particular geography, the particular talent.
Actually,
Because then we might go back to what His Honor agrees with this representation is the problem with these IPAs running their own turf and creating their own rules and laws. So that is my
I understand, Mr.
that is
President.
my humble observation.
I understand, Mr. President. I get the point of the good gentle lady from Taguig. In fact, Mr. President, in our proposal, we strengthen the relationship between BOI, FIRB, and IPAs. We strengthened it by changing the word coordination to consultation, because in practice, from what we, during our TWG, in practice, they are just being made to submit position papers, or they're just being made to attend meetings, but there's no guarantee if their suggestions will be placed inside the SIPP. So we changed the word coordination to consultation, and we did not remove FIRB. FIRB will still be part of the process, but we made it stronger in a sense that they will be consulted rather than just merely coordination, Mr. President. So,
I
FIRB will
disagree. I disagree, Your Honor, because in the paragraph and in the a few sentences within that same section, it makes it very clear that each IPA in consultation with BOI. So it's almost as if FIRB is disregarded. Anyway, I can park that. You can
Yeah,
you can
well,
look at
Mr.
it, but
President-
that is how I would now interpret it. Like wala nang role si FIRB.
I don't know if we have the same, but here in our committee report, section 300, Strategic Investment Priorities Plan, the Board of Investments, in consultation with the FIRB, Fiscal Incentive Review
but
Board.
around 12 lines below, on line 29, there's a new sentence inserted
for
that
local.
does not make reference. But that is my whole problem,
Yes,
the
Mr.
local.
Yes, Mr. President, because our interpretation here, it falls under the SIPP provision, Mr. President. But we can improve language to make sure that it's in line with national guidelines, Mr. President.
I humbly submit that this will precisely be the cause of the race to the bottom that our very sponsor is concerned
Yeah.
about. So,
That's not the intention, Mr. President, and we're open to suggestions.
yeah.
Mr.
Okay,
President.
Mr. President, we have been asked by the Senate President to suspend to make room for some items that need to be taken up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Gatchalian and Pia Cayetano, Majority Leader.
Kasi
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2762.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.